In the frozen wastelands of the Ice Age, where survival meant war and war meant death, two rival tribes prepared for a battle that would determine who controlled the last hunting grounds. But as their warriors faced each other across the blood-stained tundra, something emerged from the mist, a creature so massive it dwarfed their petty conflicts. Tonight, you'll witness how the arrival of a colossal elk turned a human war into a fight for survival against a beast that recognized no tribe, no territory, only the ancient law of the wild. The world was locked in ice, a realm where winter had claimed dominion for millennia. Across the endless tundra of what would one day become northern Alaska, the frozen earth stretched like a white canvas painted with the bones of the fallen. This was the domain of the Megaloceros, the giant elk whose antlers could span 12 feet and whose hooves could crush a man's skull like an eggshell. But on this particular dawn, the tundra would witness something even more dangerous than the megafauna that roamed its frozen expanse. The fury of desperate humans driven to war by hunger and desperation. The Korthak tribe had claimed these hunting grounds for 3 generations, following the great herds of mammoth and caribou across the ice-locked plains. Their warriors bore the scars of countless battles, not just with beasts, but with other tribes who dared to challenge their dominion. Led by their war chief Grimjaw, a massive brute whose face was a map of violence, they had never yielded territory to any enemy. Their weapons were crude but effective, spears tipped with mammoth bone, clubs studded with predator teeth, and the kind of savage cunning that came from living on the edge of extinction. Across the frozen battlefield, the Bloodfang tribe prepared for what they knew would be their final stand. Driven from their ancestral lands by a volcanic eruption that had poisoned their hunting grounds, they faced starvation if they could not claim new territory. Their chief, Scar-Eye, had lost half his vision to a cave bear's claws, but his remaining eye burned with the desperate fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. His warriors were fewer in number, but hardened by months of wandering the wasteland, eating bark and fighting off predators with nothing but determination and rage. The two tribes had been circling each other for days, like wolves testing for weakness. The Korthak held the high ground near a cluster of ancient stones that provided shelter from the wind, while the Bloodfang occupied the lower plains where the frozen carcasses of last season's hunt lay buried beneath the snow. Between them stretched a killing field of ice and stone where the bones of previous battles created treacherous footing and grim reminders of the cost of territorial disputes. As the pale sun struggled to penetrate the perpetual overcast sky, both tribes began their war preparations. The Korthak painted their faces with the blood of their enemies, while the Bloodfang scarred their flesh with obsidian blades, letting their own blood freeze on their skin as armor against the cold. The air was thick with the scent of violence and the promise of death, while the wind carried the howls of distant predators drawn by the anticipation of fresh carrion. The battle cry of the Korthak echoed across the tundra like the roar of an avalanche, answered immediately by the savage war chant of the Bloodfang. 40 warriors from each tribe charged across the frozen ground, their primitive weapons raised high, their voices joining in a symphony of violence that had echoed across these plains for countless generations. The sound of their approach, the thunder of feet on frozen earth, the clash of bone against stone, the primal screams of men embracing death, seemed to shake the very foundations of the ice-locked world. But as the two forces closed the distance between them, something else stirred in the mist that perpetually shrouded the northern reaches of the tundra. The sound that emerged from that grey veil was unlike anything human, a bellow so deep and powerful that it seemed to come from the earth itself. The warriors of both tribes faltered in their charge, their primitive instincts recognizing a threat far greater than any human enemy. From the swirling fog emerged a shadow that defied comprehension. The Megaloceros stood nearly 7 feet at the shoulder, its massive frame supported by legs like tree trunks and crowned by antlers that spread wider than a mammoth's tusks. Its eyes, cold and alien, surveyed the scene of human conflict with the indifference of a creature that had ruled these lands since before men learned to make fire. The beast's breath formed clouds of vapor in the frigid air, while its hooves, each the size of a warrior's shield, left deep impressions in the frozen ground. The giant elk had been following the scent of blood and violence, drawn by instincts older than civilization. During the rutting season, these creatures became engines of pure aggression, their massive antlers serving as weapons capable of impaling cave bears and their territorial fury knowing no bounds. The presence of so many humans in its domain triggered every predatory instinct the beast possessed, transforming it from a grazing herbivore into a force of nature bent on destruction. Grimjaw was the first to recognize the true scope of the threat they faced. His scarred features twisted into an expression of primal fear as he watched the creature emerge fully from the mist, its antlers catching what little light filtered through the overcast sky. The war chief had faced dire wolves, cave bears, and the fury of rival tribes, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the sight of this primordial giant. Scar-Eye's remaining eye widened as he took in the full magnitude of the beast before them. The creature's massive head swung toward the assembled warriors, and for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, predator and prey regarded each other across the frozen battlefield. The elk's nostrils flared as it tested the air, detecting the scent of fear and aggression that emanated from the human warriors like heat from a fire. The standoff lasted only seconds, but in that brief moment both tribes understood that their petty war had become irrelevant. The true enemy was not each other, but the force of nature that now stood between them, a creature whose very presence transformed their battlefield into a killing ground, where human cunning would be tested against millions of years of evolutionary perfection. The Megaloceros lowered its massive head, its antlers pointing toward the assembled warriors, like the spears of some primordial army. The ground trembled beneath its hooves as it pawed the frozen earth, preparing for a charge that would scatter both tribes like leaves before a hurricane. In that moment, the age-old conflict between the Korthak and Bloodfang became meaningless. Survival now depended not on defeating each other, but on surviving the wrath of a giant that recognized no human authority. The charge of the Megaloceros was like witnessing the birth of an avalanche. The creature's massive form exploded into motion with a speed that defied its enormous size, its hooves thundering against the frozen ground with the force of falling boulders. The sound of its approach sent both tribes scattering in desperate panic as tons of muscle and bone bore down upon them with unstoppable momentum. Grimjaw's warriors, caught in the open between their defensive positions and the enemy tribe, found themselves directly in the path of the beast's fury. The war chief himself barely managed to throw himself aside as the elk's massive antlers swept through the space where he had been standing. 3 of his finest warriors were not so fortunate. Caught in the creature's initial charge, they disappeared beneath its hooves, their screams cut short by the sickening sound of bones being crushed into the frozen earth. The Bloodfang tribe, positioned on the lower ground, had a moment's advantage as the elk's charge carried it past their main force. But Scar-Eye quickly realized that their position now trapped them between the rampaging beast and the rocky outcropping behind them. The creature's massive form blocked their primary escape route, while its thrashing antlers created a deadly barrier that no human could hope to cross. What followed was not a battle but a massacre, orchestrated by a force of nature that had no concept of mercy. The Megaloceros wheeled around with surprising agility for its size, its antlers sweeping in wide arcs that could decapitate multiple warriors with a single motion. The creature's eyes, now red with rage, fixed on individual targets with the focus of a predator that had perfected the art of killing over millions of years. A group of Korthak warriors attempted to coordinate an attack, surrounding the beast with spears raised high. Their strategy might have worked against a cave bear, but the Megaloceros was beyond their comprehension. The creature reared up on its hind legs, its front hooves becoming weapons as deadly as any club, and brought them down with crushing force. The impact sent shockwaves through the frozen ground, creating cracks in the ice that spread outward like spider webs. The beast's antlers became instruments of systematic destruction. With each sweep of its massive head, warriors were impaled, tossed through the air like broken dolls, or simply trampled beneath hooves that left craters in the permafrost. The creature's breath formed clouds of vapor that obscured the battlefield, creating a hellish fog through which the screams of the dying echoed like the voices of the damned. Scar-Eye, despite his desperation and the bitter rivalry that had brought his tribe to this cursed place, found himself fighting alongside Korthak warriors as the distinction between friend and enemy became meaningless. The one-eyed chief hurled his spear with all his remaining strength, watching as the obsidian point struck the creature's flank and shattered like glass against its thick hide. The Megaloceros turned its attention to him, and Scar-Eye found himself staring into eyes that held no recognition of human intelligence. The battle became a desperate game of survival, as the remaining warriors scattered across the tundra, using every trick their ancestors had learned in their struggle against the megafauna of the Ice Age. They dove behind boulders, slid into crevices in the ice, and used the terrain itself as their only defense against a creature that seemed unstoppable. But the Megaloceros was patient in its fury, methodically hunting down each human with the persistence of death itself. Grimjaw, his face now painted with the blood of his fallen warriors, attempted one final desperate strategy. Gathering the survivors from both tribes, he led them in a coordinated retreat toward a narrow canyon where the creature's size might work against it. But the elk's intelligence was greater than they had anticipated. It recognized the trap they were trying to set. Instead of following them into the confined space, the Megaloceros positioned itself at the canyon's mouth, effectively trapping the humans in a natural prison. The creature's massive antlers blocked the entrance like the bars of a cage, while its presence eliminated any hope of escape. The survivors found themselves huddled together in the growing darkness, former enemies now united by the shared knowledge that they would likely not see another dawn. As night fell across the tundra, the temperature plummeted to levels that could kill an unprotected human within hours. The Megaloceros showed no signs of fatigue or discomfort. It settled into a patient vigil at the canyon entrance, its breath forming clouds of vapor that glowed ghostly white in the starlight. The creature had learned that time was its ally. The cold would weaken its prey, making them easier targets when it chose to finish what it had started. Inside the canyon, the surviving warriors faced a choice between freezing to death and attempting to fight their way past a creature that had already demonstrated its superiority. Some argued for a desperate charge, preferring to die with weapons in their hands rather than succumb to the cold. Others advocated for waiting, hoping the beast would eventually lose interest. But as the hours passed and the cold began to claim its victims, it became clear that the Megaloceros had no intention of abandoning its vigil. The dawn that broke over the tundra revealed a scene of devastation that would become legend among the scattered tribes of the Ice Age. The Megaloceros stood among the frozen corpses of warriors from both tribes, its massive antlers silhouetted against the pale sky like a monument to the supremacy of nature over human ambition. As the giant elk finally moved away from the battlefield, its hooves leaving deep tracks in the blood-stained snow, the tundra fell silent once more. The war between the Korthak and Bloodfang tribes had ended not with human victory or defeat, but with the reminder that in the world of the Ice Age, humans were not the apex predators they believed themselves to be.